Hey guys, today we'll be discussing about monteggia and galeazzi fracture dislocation. Uh, I don't know about you guys, but this used to confuse me all the time, which is where it's getting dislocated, where it's getting fractured, and also I came up with this mnemonic and I want to share it with you guys. It's a simple mnemonic, and yeah. So if you have your own mnemonic, well and good. If you don't, and if you're always getting confused between these two fractures, uh, please listen to this video, and I'm sure your confusion will end by the end of this video. MUU and GLR. What is the significance of these two words? So yeah, this is the mnemonic I'm talking about. MUU, guys, there is no R here. Obviously there is no radius here. So this has to do something with ulna, right? So monteggia fracture, M stands for monteggia. There is a fracture in the ulna, and what is other U standing for? The upper 1/3. Now, after reading a lot of times, we can, I think we do remember that monteggia and galeazzi has something to do with the 1/3 of the fracture of radius or ulna. But where is it happening? Which end is getting dislocated? This is where we get confused, right? So MUU means in monteggia, ulna is getting fractured, but which portion? Upper 1/3 is getting fractured. Now coming to galeazzi. In galeazzi, G stands for galeazzi, L stands for lower, and R stands for radius, obviously. Now again 1/3, the same, right? Which 1/3? Lower 1/3 is getting fractured. That's why GLR. In galeazzi fracture, lower 1/3 of the radius is getting fractured. In monteggia fracture, upper 1/3 of the ulna is getting fractured. That's it, guys. Now we know where the fracture is happening. Now we need to know where the dislocation is happening. So let me show you. I'll just see if it's in the frame. Yeah. So one second, I'll erase this part. Now we know MUU and GL. We know this part, right? Now coming to dislocation. There is a dislocation happening. This is your radius, this is your ulna. Now it's bad, but just imagine the two bones, right? This is your right hand. Let's say this is your radius, this becomes your ulna. So in monteggia, what is happening? Where is the fracture happening? Upper 1/3. So this part, right? That's your fracture. This part is getting fractured. Now, that's not it. It's not just the fracture. There's also a dislocation. What is the dislocation? There's another mnemonic for the dislocation. Just remember these words. FPP. Just like MUU, MUU has a dislocation called FPP. In flexion type, because there are two dislocations. There's flexion dislocation in monteggia, there's extension dislocation in monteggia. In flexion type of dislocation, the radius dislocates, radial head dislocates posteriorly and ulna angulates posteriorly. That's why FPP. FPP stands for flexion type, posterior dislocation of radial head and posterior angulation of ulna. That happens in MUU, that is monteggia fracture. That's it. That's all you need to know about monteggia. What happens in galeazzi? Again, these bones, radius, ulna, and this is your right hand, right? So GLR states galeazzi fracture, lower 1/3 of radius. So where is the fracture? Over here. That's your fracture site, fracture location. Now where is the dislocation happening? You don't have to remember any mnemonic for this. Again, there will be too many mnemonics. All you need to know is, you have your joint here, right? Radio-ulnar joint. This is your radio-ulnar joint. During radial, when there is a fracture in galeazzi, the lower 1/3 gets fractured of the radius. There is a disruption in this joint. So your radio-ulnar joint is getting disrupted. Once it gets disrupted, ulna will dislocate. But which part of the ulna will dislocate? The joint is over here, it's getting disrupted. So the proximal end won't dislocate, right? Obviously the distal end will dislocate. So distal end of ulna will dislocate. How is it getting dislocated? It gets dislocated dorsally. Okay? So this is just after you differentiate MUU and GLR, you know where the fracture is happening. And under MUU, you need to remember one more mnemonic, FPP. If you remember FPP, you can remember extension by what is happening. Because in flexion, if posterior dislocation and angulation is happening, you know in extension the opposite will happen, right? So don't remember all these things, just remember MUU and FPP, so that you know the fracture site and you know dislocation, how it's happening. But when it comes to GLR, there's only one mnemonic, you know where the fracture is happening, lower 1/3 of radius. After that happens, all you need to know is that, all you need to recollect is that there's a radio-ulnar joint over here. So when the radius is getting fractured in its lower 1/3 portion, I think the radio-ulnar joint will be disrupted. That's how you need to recollect. So now I'm saying in galeazzi, lower 1/3 is getting fractured. So this means the lower portion may radio-ulnar joint is getting disrupted. So if it's getting disrupted, ulna has to dislocate. Which portion will dislocate? If the joint is getting disrupted here, if it's getting disrupted here, the distal portion of the ulna will dislocate. How will it dislocate? Dorsally it will get dislocated. That's it. This you have to come on your own, guys. You don't have to memorize it. After you remember, you recollect this GLR, what is happening, you have to deduce the next steps. Like what, once it's getting disrupted, there's also a joint. I remember that there's a joint over there. Once the joint get disrupted, ulna should dislocate. Which part? Obviously the distal part will get dislocated because joint is over the distal end. Once the joint is gone, the distal portion will dislocate. How is it dislocating? Dorsally. That's it, guys. That's all you need to remember about monteggia and galeazzi. You don't have to refer your materials every time. I'll go through it once again in very briefly. So coming to this, monteggia and galeazzi fracture dislocation, what is the mnemonic? I said MUU and GLR. Once you remember this has something to do with fractures, MUU and GLR. Now you know how the fracture is happening in monteggia, upper 1/3, in galeazzi, lower of 1/3 of radius. Now that you differentiated, but how is the dislocation happening? Coming to MUU, you need to remember FPP. If you remember FPP, you will recollect immediately that, okay, there are two types. There is a flexion type, there is an extension type. If FPP, if the mnemonic is saying FPP, means flexion type, posterior angulation of ulna and posterior dislocation of radial head, which means extension will be the opposite mechanism will be taking place, right? And in GLR, what happens in GLR? Don't remember any mnemonic in GLR. You know that distal 1/3 of the radius is getting fractured, which means now according to what I read, like this you need to remember. According to what I read, I know there is a joint in between radio-ulnar joint. So if that is getting disrupted, ulna should dislocate. Which part will dislocate? Distal end will dislocate. How is it dislocating? Dorsally. That's all. The treatment is ORIF, open reduction, internal fixation. That's it, guys. And yeah, I forgot to mention one more point, basic point. So how are these fractures happening? Fall on outstretched hand. Fall on outstretched hand. This is almost the case for everything, right? Almost, I mean, most fractures, this is what is happening. Arm fractures, they're falling on outstretched hands. So yeah, that is the cause. This is the pathoanatomy of what is taking place, and the treatment is ORIF. That's all you need to know about monteggia and galeazzi. So next time you have confusion, just remember MUU and GLR. Under MUU, how dislocation is happening, matlab you should remember FPP. Under GLR, how dislocation is happening means you need to remember that a radio-ulnar joint is present. So if radial part is distal 1/3, I mean lower 1/3 is getting fractured, something should happen to that radio-ulnar joint. It's getting disrupted. If it gets disrupted, ulna should dislocate. How is it dislocating? Dorsally. And obviously the joint is in the distal portion. So which part of the ulna will get dislocated? The distal end will get dislocated. That's it, guys. I hope this video helped you clarify your confusion between these two things, because I used